Child psychology and trauma. Today I want to walk through childhood trauma using a developmental lens. Childhood trauma is rarely just a single event. It is a shaping force that influences how the brain, body, and identity develop over time. To understand this clearly, we can look at three parts of the story. First, we need to understand what childhood trauma actually is. Second, we need to understand how trauma conditions the developing brain. And third, we can look at what often happens as that child grows into adolescence. Let's begin with what childhood trauma actually is. From a child psychology perspective, trauma is not defined by a specific event alone. Instead, it is defined by what a child's nervous system had to endure, without enough protection, safety, or repair. A child becomes traumatized when stress or threat becomes overwhelming, and there is no consistent support to help them return to calm. This often happens when threat is chronic or unpredictable, when caregivers are the source of fear or are emotionally unavailable, when the child has no power to leave the situation, or when the child's emotions are not mirrored, soothed, or helped to make sense. Childhood trauma can take many forms. It can include physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. It can include emotional or physical neglect. It can come from living in chronic instability or chaos, or being exposed to fear for long periods of time. Trauma can also occur when a child is forced to grow up too quickly, or when they are consistently unseen, unheard, or unsupported during moments of distress. For a child, safety is relational. Children rely on caregivers not only for food and shelter, but also for emotional regulation. They learn what safety feels like through connection with another human being. Because of this, trauma for children often happens inside relationships rather than outside of them. Now let's talk about how childhood trauma conditions the developing brain. A child's brain is still under construction. It is not finished or fully wired. The brain develops through repetition and experience, not through intention. What a child experiences over and over again becomes the blueprint for how their brain organizes itself. One of the biggest influences on this development is stress hormones, especially cortisol. In a healthy environment, stress follows a natural cycle. Stress rises when something upsetting happens. A caregiver helps regulate the child and provides comfort. The stress resolves, and the child's nervous system returns to calm. Over time, the brain learns something incredibly important. I can return to calm. But in traumatic environments, that cycle is interrupted. Stress stays elevated for long periods of time. There is no consistent co-regulation from a caregiver. Cortisol remains high in the body, and the brain begins adapting to expect danger. When stress hormones stay elevated for long periods of time, they begin shaping the architecture of the brain. They can alter how neurons grow, change the way synapses are pruned during development, and shift brain development toward survival circuits rather than regulation circuits. This is important to understand, because this is not simply emotional damage, this is neurodevelopmental conditioning. The brain becomes extremely skilled at survival, while the systems responsible for rest and regulation develop more slowly. Several key brain areas are affected by this process. The amygdala, which is responsible for detecting threat, often becomes enlarged and highly reactive. It learns to scan the environment for danger constantly, and can trigger alarm signals faster than conscious thought. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for reasoning, impulse control, and emotional regulation, develops more slowly in stressful environments. It has less ability to calm emotional reactions when stress appears. The hippocampus, which helps organize memory and provide context to experiences, can also be affected. This can make it harder for a person to place emotional experiences clearly in time. As a result, traumatic feelings can feel immediate and overwhelming even many years later. In simple terms, the brain becomes very good at surviving, but underdeveloped at resting. Trauma also shapes how children learn to attach to other people. Children instinctively adapt to whatever environment they are born into. They learn who they must become in order to stay connected and safe. Over time, the brain begins forming internal relational rules. A child might unconsciously learn that if they need too much, they will lose connection. They might learn that if they stay quiet, they survive. They might learn that if they perform well, they are loved, or that if they show emotion, they are punished. These rules become survival maps for relationships. Eventually, those survival maps can become part of identity. This is one way attachment trauma slowly becomes woven into how a person sees themselves and the world. During adolescence, the brain is often asking a powerful question. Who do I need to be in order to stay safe now? Trauma can also affect how the brain processes stress and reward. These beliefs are reinforced by a brain that has learned to experience danger internally rather than externally. But there is a very important reframe that needs to be understood. Childhood trauma does not create damaged people. It creates incredibly intelligent adaptations in brains that had no other choice. What might look like defiance is often protection. What looks like numbness is often emotional overload. What looks like control is often an attempt to create safety. And what looks like collapse is often pure exhaustion. These responses once served a purpose. And there is hopeful news within neuroscience. Adolescence is not only a vulnerable time, it is also a powerful window of brain plasticity. The brain is still capable of change. With consistent safety, attuned relationships, education about the nervous system, and the development of regulation skills, the brain can continue growing in new ways. The prefrontal cortex can strengthen its ability to regulate emotions. Threat responses in the amygdala can calm. Attachment patterns can be revised. And identity can expand beyond survival patterns. Development may have been interrupted, but it was not destroyed. Childhood trauma does not remove potential. In many cases, it simply delays development.